Good evening and welcome. I'm Kathy Cook. I'm the Executive Director of Kansas Families for Education. We are so glad that you all came out tonight. This is such an important election. I'm going to take just a minute of liberty. Harriet probably didn't know I was going to do this, but I would encourage all of you to read Steve Kraski's article where he interviews John Brattle. I would encourage you to read Mike Hendricks' article and learn about the issues that face our schools. Tomorrow, we will be testifying against the abolishment of the State Board of Education. So be very glad that you have an opportunity to elect your local school board here at the local level. And if you oppose abolishing the State Board of Education, you should let your legislator know that as well. I'm going to quickly introduce the candidates, and then I'm going to hand it over to Harriet to go over the rules. We have Tim Dorr, Jefferson, Patty Mack, Bart Alsberg, Joan Levins, John St. Clair, Jeff Seeler, Lonnie Kirsch, and Josh McCray. I also want to thank our co-sponsors for the evening, the Mainstream Coalition, True Blue Women, Kansas Citizens for Science. So enjoy, ask your questions. And don't forget you can stay afterwards if your question's not asked and visit for a moment with the school board members. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you for inviting the lead. All right, my name is Harriet Anderson, and I'm the president of Ann Etter. And she's on our government committee, get the lead. My two helpers are Ann Arnott and Virginia Johnson. And if you have questions, you have them turn them in, just signal one of them and they'll come and get your question. Or you can bring it down. Okay. What we're going to do first is I will ask a question starting at this end with this gentleman, and each one will answer in a minute's time. The second question will be directed at the young lady next to her, who's number 2, and it will go down and come back this direction. That way, not everybody has to answer the first question all the time. So, Mr. Dorr, first question to you. I'm sorry. Do we have 2 more down there to share? Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Hello. Can you hear me? All right. Good evening. I'm Tim Dorr. I'm running for the school board for the North area. I have lived in the Shawnee Mission District for about 15 years, 13 of it in the North area. I currently teach at the college level for Brown-Mackey College and work in sales for a human resources consulting company. Spent most of my professional life in emergency services, working in emergency medicine. I bring to the board a lot of management experience and experience as a educator, and I hope to be able to use that knowledge to be able to provide for a strong problem-solving capability to the board. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Goodburn. I've lived in Johnson County for 40 plus years. I actually am a graduate of the district. I went to Brookwood Elementary. I went to Indian Creek Junior High School and Shawnee Mission South. In 1982, I graduated. My husband Kelly and I have owned our house in Roland Park for about 21 years. And I have 2 sons, Kyle and Corey. Kyle is currently a senior at Shawnee Mission North, and Corey is a 7th grader at Indian Hills Middle School. I'm the past PTA president at Roseland, actually twice. I served on Roseland and North Site Councils, PTA Exec Boards, North Booster Club. I'm currently the president. Shawnee Mission Education Foundation as a board member, and most recently the Middle Schools Facilities Committee. My community and public involvement includes Cub Scouts and Boy Scouts actually in this church. I meet about every Monday night in this church. I've been den leader, Cub Master, and committee chair. I've been an active volunteer for the Ronald McDonald House, and I serve as an international officer for Alpha Delta Pi sorority and training collegiate women. And I'm also a board member for Baptist Trinity Lutheran Legacy Foundation.
Thank you. Mr. Baptiste.
Good evening. My name is Charles Baptiste, and I reside in Shawnee. I'm a resident from Louisiana. I have two sons in Omaha, Nebraska. One who's very much involved in education, middle school principal, and I have a program engineer. And I've been here 22 years. I'm probably more different than everyone on the panel here tonight, for the simple reason I have no children in school. But I consider all children, all kids, my kids. And I'm inspired to run for the school board so that I can make a contribution. I have 37 years of government experience, and I have a degree in urban geography, human relations. I attended school at Berkeley, UC, in Harvard University, Kennedy School of Government. I am very much interested in the school board. I'm not running for the school board. I'm being pushed into the school board. Thank you.
Ms. Jefferson.
Well, good evening to all of you. Is this on?
Yes.
Okay, good evening to all of you. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and to everyone here this evening and the Kansas Families for Education for hosting this event. All of you as well. I see several children in the audience, so I think that's actually wonderful. This is democracy in action. It's a beautiful thing. As a professional nonprofit and professional public and nonprofit administrator with an extensive experience in multicultural issues and community collaboration, I realize it takes all of us to improve education in our community. My 20-plus years of experience in promoting educational issues, working with students at Haskell Indian Nations University as director and president of the Haskell Interfaith Council, working as the founder and president of a neighborhood improvement association in Topeka. I believe that it takes all of us to help all levels of learners, regardless of their economic status, here in our community. With my master's in public administration, I possess the skills to make educated and thoughtful decisions for our district. Thank you very much. That is very short. Very short.
Ms. Mack, please.
Good evening. My name is Patty Mack, and I'm the current Board of Education member for the Shawnee Mission Northwest area. It's been my honor to serve that Northwest area for the last 3.5 years. I'm a product of public schools. I grew up north of the river in western Missouri. Went to the University of Kansas, Washington University in St. Louis for my law degree, and I am a retired attorney. Heavily invested in the Shawnee community. A lot of volunteer work, which you can see that list in the newspaper if you'd like to look at it. My husband Scott and I have 3 children. 2 went K through 12 through Shawnee Mission Schools, and I currently have a freshman at Shawnee Mission Northwest. I've learned a lot over the last 3.5 years, and I want to use that knowledge and experience in keeping our school district strong. The staff, the district, the Board of Education, and our students and our community are deeply committed to quality education. That's the #1 goal in Shawnee Mission School District, is academic achievement. And I believe that we are meeting those goals. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mack. Mr. Alton Burn.
Could you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Mark Altenburn. I live in Prairie Village. I have spent 35 years in the field of education as a teacher, coach, and administrator. 10 of those years were spent at Westridge Middle School in the Shawnee Mission District. As a member of the community, I have recognized that the district found itself with no easy solution this fall with some school closing boundary changes. And one of the reasons that I've been interested in seeking a board position is to make sure that in the future, the board is more transparent and more collaborative in how it deals with the public. We have a wonderful district, and I think the financial problems that we are now facing makes it even more important for the people who serve on the board to be both innovative in finding new ways to finance what we're doing, and also to put pressure on the state legislature to help us educate our kids at the level of excellence that we demand. We're going to have to make some tough cuts, I'm afraid, in the near future, and one of the things I'm committed to is keeping those things as far away from kids as possible. You may have noticed the district is asking people to volunteer.
Thank you, Mr. Altenberg. Ms. Levens.
Hi, my name is Joan Levens. I'm a lifelong educator and have worked in nonprofits throughout my career bringing resources to schools. Shawnee Mission is at a crossroads. Our school district has a tradition of academic excellence, which attracts the businesses to our community and provides us this quality of life that we enjoy. This district has more national merit scholars than any other district in the state. It has demonstrated how to close the achievement gap, and while diversity is increasing in our district, it is showing how to increase overall achievement across the district. Wow. Although we're facing tough economic times, I don't think the legislature is the answer to our prayers. Although I'm endorsed by Senator Brattle and Tim Owens, Senator Owens, who are on the Education Committee, Pat Colleton, I don't think that's where our answer lies. I think it's now time up to us to find out this innovative solutions to fund our schools, to bring the community together, to find the resources and find a new way forward, a new path for our district.
Thank you, Ms. Levens. Mr. St. Clair.
Hi, my name is John St. Clair. I'm also running for the at-large position. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. Quick history, my family's been lifelong residents of the district. My wife and I have 2 kids in the district, a freshman at Shawnee Mission East and a son at Highlands Elementary. And the reason I'm running, 2 main reasons. I think I bring a solid business background. I work to help improve clients and their business problems. I've worked with school districts in that capacity. I know how to work with clients, find solutions, and implement those solutions. 2, I served the city of Fairway for 10 years as a councilman and mayor, and I believe I have the political know-how to work with the legislature and work with local communities to help regreen our communities, retain and attract folks to our school district to keep and enhance the quality of Shawnee Mission. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Deb Zila. I am the current Southbury representative on the Board of Education. This has been my first term, so I'm about 3.5 years into it. My husband and I have been married 31+ years. We've lived our entire married life here in Shawnee Mission, 5 years, almost 6 years in Prairie Village, and then in our current home in Overland Park. We have 3 children, all who have been educated through the Shawnee Mission schools and have had a marvelous education. Since the get-go at kindergarten, I was involved with PTA all the way through till my youngest daughter graduated from high school. I was on site councils. I was president of units 5 different years in 3 different schools. I was on the South Area Advisory Board when they had advisory boards till those were abolished. And have enjoyed my term so far on the school board. It has been vastly interesting. And I would say the learning curve is huge coming into this. And I have learned so much in the last 3 years. And I am just hoping to continue that knowledge base and move forward and find new solutions for us in Shawnee Mission.
Thank you, Ms. Zilla. Ms. Curry.
We've been in the school district about over 10 years. My children are grown, but my grandchild is in Prairie Village, so I have a vested interest in the future. I'm a lifelong student because I have an undergrad in American history, secondary education, and a master's in American history, and I'm working on finishing a different degree because I love American history. And I felt it was about time that I started serving instead of just standing on the sidelines. So I made that decision this past summer. I also have corporate work in Sprint and General Electric, where I worked as a project manager. And my whole philosophy is that the school board member is a servant of the people, that I'm there to represent you, to listen to you, and make the best decisions I can according to your advice also.
Thank you, Ms. Kirsch. Mr. McCray.
My name is Josh McCray. I live in Overland Park. I've been a resident of the district my entire life. However, I did come from the private school system. I attended an elementary school in the Shawnee Mission South area. I graduated from Bishop Miege. I'm hoping that having a little bit different background, a little bit different perspective can help me to give an outside perspective to some of our problems that we were having. I did go to Johnson County Community College where I studied fire service administration. I've been involved in politics since I turned 18 and started to vote. Currently, I'm over at Dorothy Moody where I help out with the Cub Scout program and with the PTA.
Thank you, Mr. McCrae. Before we do our first question, I want to, I don't know if you want to call it a disclaimer, but we will try very hard to get all of your questions. And if not, I apologize at the outset. The first question goes to Mr. Dorr now. What size schools do you think are best for learning and teaching, and why? In a minute.
That's not a lot. Depending upon the type of the school would have a lot to do with that. Trying to lump them together, the lower grades, kindergarten through third grade, we need to try to keep the classroom size as small as economically possible. The middle grades, somewhere around 24 students is appropriate. I grew up in a school where we had 30, so I understand the aspects. But in the lower grades, we need to make sure that we have plenty of time for that one-on-one development with the students, because those really are the most formidable years.
Thank you.
I just concur with you. I agree. I think that the smaller class sizes actually are better. And as they get older, obviously they can have a few more students in the class. In the size school, I think that just depends. I mean, the 3-section grades, I think the schools that each have 3 sections are nice. They're efficient. I think that is a really great size school. And I think that in general, our high schools, they're a good size to have. Probably 300 or 400 in a graduating class would be good.
Thank you, Mr. Baptiste.
In reference to science school, small, medium, or large, it depends on the individual, the quality of the school, the education, and the quality of what instruction the kids are getting at home. The school size, we should deal with the total child, the physical, the spiritual, and the social aspect, which give you a total developed child. I've attended one-room school up to the walls of Berkeley, Grambling College, University of Oklahoma, and Nebraska, and they all made the same to me, the quality, the learning aspect. Due to the fact we have a short of a budget, we have to think of other ways that we can increase the most important resource that we have in this country, and that's our kids, is to teach them at home, at church, the community, and at school. To give the teacher that time so that he or she can develop that pupil. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Jepson.
As a former educator in public and private schools, and also I attended public and private schools growing up, I will tell you that the size of school and the size of the classroom, what it boils down to is the core nucleus of the teacher in the classroom. There is a core unit that exists between that teacher and the students in that classroom, and we have to preserve that core unit. I am a major advocate of keeping the class sizes as small as we possibly can, because what we do is we end up stressing that core unit. And when we stress that core unit, what happens is that education, individualized education, just does not happen. It stresses our teachers, it stresses our building, it stresses our community, and it stresses the collaboration that needs to happen within that building, the community, the school board, all working together for the best of our children. And we need to be able to preserve that and be as efficient as possible. Otherwise, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mack.
Obviously, a low pupil-teacher ratio is ideal, but I think the size is what you can afford. And unfortunately, right now, Topeka, we as a school board had to increase our guidelines by 2. And if you went down and talked to all members of the school board and the superintendent, in fact, he used the word hate. I don't use that word very often, but we hated changing those guidelines and increasing it by 2. The administration has stated that they're going to try and staff at the lower end of those guidelines. They are just guidelines. It's hard. You don't want to look at children and our students as numbers, but that is what we have to work with. And I'm proud of an administration who's going to try and staff those classrooms at the lowest numbers that they possibly can.
Thank you, Ms. Mack. Mr. Walker.
Specifically answering the question, I did a research paper about a decade ago and I was taking a graduate class. The optimum size of elementary schools is supposed to be 400. The optimum size for middle schools, 600, and the optimum size for high schools, 1,200. The study looked at affordability, opportunities for students to take appropriate number of elective courses, especially at the secondary level. So that 400, 600, 1,200 number is stuck in my head for a long time. When I was in Lansing as the principal, we built a new middle school with the idea in mind of building it so that it would effectively hold 600 students. And the idea was to follow those guidelines. We also did some things we no longer do in this district, and one of those has been teaming at the middle school level, which I think is something we should try to bring back. And I agree with everybody else as far as the lower the class size, the better, but particularly in what I refer to as primary grades.
Ms. Levens.
The smaller the pupil-teacher ratio, the better, the more effective education can happen. We have more mainstreaming. I hear a lot of talk about, well, when I grew up, we had 30 kids in our class. We had 35 kids in our class. But we have a different constitution of our class each year now. We have students who have special needs who are mainstreamed into our classes, and that requires more from the teacher to individualize instruction for the various levels in the class. It's important that we maintain these smaller class sizes as best we can, because that is the most effective way to improve our education of our kids.
Thank you. Ms. Stella? Oh, Mr.
Okay. Size of the school, I think, can vary. I think I've seen elementaries with my kids that small size works well, large size works well. The key is the student-teacher ratio. If we have lower student-teacher ratios, I think the education's better, the teaching's better, the learning's better. That's the key. The problem, of course, is all you know is that funding is the problem. So I think we need to start doing things to change the playing field, to look at other ways to raise money to keep and attract our students to this area so we can keep that funding and keep that excellence moving forward and keep our ratios as small as possible.
Now, Ms. Stella.
I think we can all unequivocally say that small class sizes would be the optimal thing that we would like to have for our kids here. The first thing that came to my head when she said what size is the best size school, we kind of go for a guideline that we'd like elementary schools to be about 3 to 4 sections of each grade level, because then you can keep all your specials, your music, your PE, your librarian, all at full-time status, rather than sharing with other schools, which gets kind of complicated, and it's not what we would prefer to have in our schools. We are, for the secondary schools, I'd say 350 to 400 kids is optimal. That we have the graduating class somewhere within that range there. We are very fortunate in Shawnee Mission that we have the quality of teachers we do. We do hate to fill that classroom with students, but our teachers are amazing, and our administrators are amazing in the things that they can accomplish, even with slightly larger class sizes.
Thank you. Ms. Kirsch?
We're all very aware that it's much better for a student to be in a smaller classroom because they can get more personal attention, which is how a good teacher wants it to be anyway. A good teacher nowadays has a terrible time because they have to try to, if they want to do their best, they're going to have to try to adapt to different learning styles of all these children and give them the attention they need. So whatever we can do to try to keep our class sizes small, I think is the best. Of course, elementary has different needs, middle school has different needs, high school has different needs, but they all have special things that they need to have from the school. Even in high school, it'd be nice to have, make sure we don't cut down counselors and that type of service to young adults.
Thank you, Ms. Kirsch. Mr. McCray.
For the sake of beating a dead horse with the 11th answer, that's the exact same. As far as the most efficient size of a building, I feel whatever we can maximize the usefulness of the building. Having half-empty schools does nobody a service. Students are going to end up suffering because they're going to have part-time librarians, part-time counselors. So for me, the optimal class size is going to be whatever class is going to maximize the use of a building. But at the same time, allowing the younger grades to have a smaller class so they have more one-on-one time to develop the responsibilities that they're going to need later on in their education, to put those into play when they're in the older grades with a slightly larger class size.
Thank you, Mr. McCray. Second question, we start with Ms. Goodburn. Question is, have you received a contribution of more than $1,000 from an individual, business, or organization? And if yes, would you disclose from whom?
I have not.
Thank you. Short and sweet. Mr. John Baptiste.
I confirm, I have not, and I do not intend to receive contributions because the value of our children is too important to put a dollar sign to. Thank you.
Ms. Jepson.
I think one of the things that I've appreciated about this race is that we've had so many people of the community giving what they can off of this race. And no, I have not, by the way. I'll answer that question straight out. I wish I would have received a donation of $1,000. No. But I just think that's wonderful that what I've seen a lot of, and I've talked to a lot of different candidates, what they're going to see is they get contributions of $5, $10, $15, $20, $25, whatever people can give, because they really believe in the process of a healthy school board, and they want a healthy competition and a candidate choice at the polls.
Thank you. Ms.
Not to my knowledge.
Thank you. Mr. Alterburn.
It would show a lot of love, but not to my knowledge either. I've received hundreds of small donations, somewhere in the $10 to $50 range, and we have been able to get kind of a grassroots support, I think, across the district with a lot of small donations, but nothing in that range.
Ms. Levin.
No, we've not received anything like that either. We've got broad-based support from across the district, and truly appreciate the support that we've received from everyone else. But no, nothing like that. Thank you.
Mr. St. Clair.
I also have not received a contribution of that size. I've received several small ones like the others, but nothing that large.
Ms. Sella.
No.
I like those answers. Ms. Kirsch.
By the way, you have to report if you spend over $500. These times when people are spending thousands of dollars on elections, I don't think that's good for a candidate. To be doing that is just a poor example, I think. So, no, I have not, and I probably will not. They have a few contributions from grassroots members.
Mr. McCray.
My largest contributions have been $20 from several people. So to answer the question straightforward, no.
And I will reiterate everybody else, no, I have not received any contributions.
I don't think that microphone's on.
I don't think it was working very well. Put it close to your mouth, maybe.
Testing?
Yeah.
If you talk right into it.
Okay, let's get to the third question. Now, this is just for the North and the at-large candidates. Hawker Grove is projected to have an enrollment of nearly 1,000 students. Do you believe that the recommendations of the facility committee are adequate to meet the needs of the students and teachers? Let's see, who's first on the North here? All right, at large. You first? Sure.
In the fall, when the proposals were made to combine middle schools, when I talked several times in the forums was about the issue of overcrowding. matter, although I think it's less of an issue. The Indian Hills issue about crowding is something that is a genuine concern to me. For months, we were told there was plenty of room, and now we're adding substantial amount of square footage to these buildings in the next 18 months. I don't see how we can have that both ways. I do believe Hawker Grove is going to be very crowded. I wish there was something that could be done in the short term, perhaps as unpopular as this may be, to add portables until the additional space is put onto those buildings, because believe me, they are going to be, particularly Hawker Grove, quite full.
Ms. Levens?
There will be more students in the building than have been there in the past, definitely. There will be additions made to the buildings, and hopefully to address that in the future. The district will make plans, I'm sure, to accommodate the students, the larger number of students that are there. I think that's my answer.
Well, definitely, I think it's one of those issues where we need to look at, there are plans in the works, obviously, as you all know, to deal with some of the crowding issues at Hawker and Indian Hills. I know my son was one who was not necessarily looking forward to the Mission Valley merger because he didn't want to go to the bigger school, but he's good with it. And I think we'll all learn to adjust and move forward. If other things need to be done in the future, I think we'll make those adjustments as we can and as we can afford to. So I think it's just one of those things that we have to try it out, see how it works. We'll have to adjust as we need to, and just keep moving forward.
Mr. St. Clair?
Based on the information, Hawker Grove is going to have the largest population as far as middle school by 2017, so within a little over the next 5 years. The plan does not provide for enough room for the number of students that they're going to have. So I personally do not agree with the current recommendations. I think it's a Band-Aid, and it's not going to solve the long-term problem. I think it needs to be addressed in a different manner.
And Ms. Goodburn?
I actually sat on that committee, Middle Schools Facility Committee, and yeah, I agree with what we came up with in that. I believe, yes, Hawker is going to be crowded, and we're going to have to put up with that. I know that the new principal of Hawker next year is going to be Scott Sherman. He's already working on the plans for the buses for next year, and he is committed to making sure that that works. I know it's going to be a little tight, and I know that I have not seen the actual plan to see how many classrooms are going to be adding or how much square footage they're going to be adding to the building. Yet, I think we have yet to see that. Right now, the recommendations have been made to add classrooms, but we haven't seen what that recommendation is quite yet. So I think that that's going to be really important when those actual recommendations are made to the board, to take another look at that to make sure that we do have enough room for those students. I have vested interest. My son will be there next year for his 8th grade year. He's having to move from Indian Hills to Hawker because of he went to Roseland Elementary and he has to move to Hawker, which we're just thrilled about. We're actually really, really, really thrilled about the single feeder and the single feeder going to the north. I can't tell you how excited I am about that.
Thank you. Would you give that to Mr. Jean-Baptiste if he's next in line? Mr. Baptiste, I need to ask you a question. Do you support creationism and/or intelligent design in the science classroom, yes or no? And are you committed to teaching sex education? And if so, would it be abstinence only or safer sex? That's a lot in one.
First response would be no. And second, in terms of sex education, I would prefer to use the term human development. And in terms of the type of sex education, I think it has to be worked with the parents and the school. I would not want anyone to be teaching my child sex education with not knowing what it's all about. When we talk about sex education, we're looking at the medium. Everyone has a mobile phone, the kids, the internet. So we have to start at home, but we have to have a program between the parents and the school in order to teach the term what we call sex education, which I would prefer to use human development, because then you can incorporate the whole process from birth to death.
Ms. Jackson?
Could you repeat that question? There was a lot in that question. I want to make sure I answer.
Do you support creationism yes or no. Are you committed to teaching sex education, and if so, would it be abstinence only or safer sex?
Well, this is a great question. I actually was a middle school science teacher, and I dealt with this all the time in the classroom. I'm in support of teaching theory. I'm in support of teaching scientific theory in the classroom. I do teach, when I taught creationism as a theory. I taught intelligent design as a theory. And I left that there as a theory in the classroom. I also followed state standards wherever I taught of what the state felt that we needed to teach our children. As far as sex education goes, this is a health education as well within our schools. And I believe that it's really important to have age-appropriate materials for our children to understand. Unfortunately, these things aren't being always taught at home, or they're not being taught clearly with correct terminology, et cetera, et cetera. I like to be able to, in my classroom, to teach, again, health education, to have the children understand all of the, what we call the development, child development appropriately for their age.
Thank you. Ms. Mack?
The first part of the question is not generally an issue that is decided at the local level, that is decided at the state level. The second question about sex education, I think the Shawnee Mission School District does an outstanding job with its age-appropriate curricula. And I think that abstinence should be taught along with other birth control methods, with the emphasis on making healthy choices.
Mr. Hatchburn?
Because intelligent design and creationism are not established scientific theories, I would not support them being taught in public schools. I think that's best left up to families for them to teach these concepts. As far as the sex education issue, I support age-appropriate, comprehensive sex education program. I like to say this all the time, but I think it's better to know than not know.
Ms. Levin?
I'm not in favor of teaching creationism or intelligent design in the science class. It may have a place in the social studies class as a part of the discussion, but it's not a science, part of the science curriculum. And I'm also in favor of teaching comprehensive health and sexual education in our schools. Abstinence only can be an option, or abstinence can be an option, but abstinence only as the sole information that's given to our students is not effective or appropriate. Parents should have the option to review the materials if they like, and also to opt their students out if they so desire.
Thank you, Mr. Sinclair.
I don't believe we should teach creationism in the science classroom, to answer question number one. Question number two, I've always said the more you know, the more you know, and I certainly support comprehensive, age-appropriate sex education for our kids. If that helps all of us talk about it and work through issues and problems, the better off we are.
Intelligent design creationism, I know this has gone back and forth many times. As Mrs. Mack said, I think this is more of a state mandate to us of what is taught. I think family values and the home support in that realm is much more effective with kids. I think as a theory, I don't know, I could probably see it as a theory, but then you never know how that theory is being taught in the classroom really, unless there's some curriculum base to that. For sex education, I think it should be abstinence-based, but I think it should be a comprehensive, very age-appropriate program. And I think knowledge is power for these kids, so they need to know the facts. And it's just the sign of the times with our kids these days.
Thank you, Ms. Kirsch.
I don't think that creationism or intelligent design should be just totally obliterated from the classroom, because you're going to have students in there that believe that anyway. Treating it as a theory, I think, is great, and it just shows openness. Sex education, I prefer the parents to take the leading role in this. I understand that some parents don't. But to me, that is for my kids and for my grandchild. I would want to be very, very well informed of what the school is teaching. And I think I have enough scientific facts has to support that abstinence only is the healthiest for our kids.
Mr. McRae?
This is kind of where the background in private schools comes in nice. I don't believe that creationism should be in the science rooms. I feel it's better suited to be in a theological discussion and leave, more scientific study to the science rooms itself. As far as the sex education, I think abstinence plus would be kind of the best way to describe how I feel. The kids need to be educated, age appropriately to all the dangers that are out there. They need to know how to go to their parents, go to people if they have questions. They need to be comfortable with that. So definitely an abstinence-based program, but with extra information to let them know what's out there.
Along a science classroom. If it's part of a religion class, philosophy class, that is perfectly fine, but not in a science class. As far as sex ed is concerned, I do believe in age-appropriate sex education. It's our job to educate, and if we do not provide that education, there can be a lot of mistakes made, especially when that education is not happening at home either. If abstinence is part of that age-appropriate education, I am all for that, but I do believe that what information we provide should be available to the parents. The parents have the right to opt their student out or allow them to participate in what's appropriate for their age.
Thank you, Ms. Goodburn.
I agree. Intelligent design, creationism doesn't belong in the science classroom, and definitely I believe that the program the district currently has, I've seen a lot of the materials that have come home, and I believe that they are age appropriate for the kids and believe that they should be taught. We should educate the children on that.
All right, now we start with question 5 for Ms. Gibson. What is your opinion on the proposed Kansas constitutional amendment to bar the courts from ruling on school finance provisions?
Repeat that just one more time. I've heard most of it, but go ahead, please repeat it.
What is your opinion on the proposed Kansas constitutional amendment to bar the courts from ruling on school finance provisions?
Well, one of the things that we saw in Montoy versus State is that in my opinion, what we saw with that 1991 court decision was that we really had a Supreme Court of Kansas that, in my opinion, overstepped its bounds. And what it did is it not only said that they didn't feel that the funding of education was fair, but they took it a step further in order to say just how much that they thought that it should. We need to have equal balance of power, of course, between our legislative and our judicial, but we need to be absolutely careful that we are not allowing the judiciary to set that form with the legislative. Okay, we just absolutely have to keep both of those absolutely separate and not bleed one into the other. We do have problems in our state funding formula. We know it's biased. We know that it's broken. But the legislative branch has to fix it. And we need to be supportive of that with our legislators.
Thank you, Ms. Mack.
In general, I'm not in favor of messing with constitutions. As a retired attorney, and as Ms. Jefferson said earlier, I don't think you want to mess with the checks and balances of the 3 branches of government. I think that there is a checks and balance here in the state of Kansas, as there is throughout the nation, for a reason. The finance formula is broken. We know that in Johnson County more than any other county. And I would really like the legislature to look at it right now, not next year, not in the fall. Right now, I'd like the legislature to look at it. That being said, it is difficult when the courts do get involved because I think that it does not bode well for Johnson County sometimes. I think that we are looked at by outstate folks as being the big mean county. Would like to keep it out of the courts, but I don't think a constitutional amendment is the way to go.
Thank you. Mr. Alderman Brennan?
I certainly would not support a constitutional amendment barring the courts from reviewing school finance. I just think that's kind of a ridiculous concept. However, I realize that in our state right now, there is growing concern about high taxes. And that one of the reasons for that is that schools are such a large part of the state's finances. It's over 50% of the state's budget is K-12 education. That to take the courts out of the system would just break down the whole concept of checks and balances, which of course has already been mentioned several times. You know, democracy can be pretty messy, but over time, it seems to me like the system works, and eventually the right solution is found. But there's going to be some time now where it's going to be difficult for us to come up with additional funding if we're not given some more local control, which I insist we deserve, at least so that we can get our spending per pupil to the state average, which we are not there. In fact, we're hundreds of dollars behind it.
Thank you, Ms. Levens.
I'm not in favor of a constitutional amendment to change the checks and balances of our government. We would have no recourse should the legislature continue to slash our budget. I think I just lost my mic. Keep talking. Okay. So that I'm not in favor of that. I have been going to the legislature for the last 10 years and advocating for our schools with legislators and find that we're in a worse situation, not a better situation. I don't think that we should stop advocating for our schools with the legislature. We absolutely need to be doing that, and as school board members especially, we need to be doing that. But that seemed to work. But I do think it's time for us to turn to our own community to find the resources in our own community. We are a strong community. We are an extremely talented community. We have engineers from around the world that have found solutions for other communities. And use one right now. And I think that we're creative and we turn to our own community. We would be able to find.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. St. Clair?
I'm just going to try and wing this, hopefully. I would not support a constitutional amendment. Again, I think we need to respect the checks and balances system that our government has set up for us and works over time very, very well. The key is we need to be working with our legislators and local communities to work on solutions to increase local funding, local option money, so that we can educate our kids and fund the education for our kids that we want and not be dependent totally on a state formula.
Thank you. Ms. Gila?
I like the way you say that. I would absolutely agree that I do not think that we should be messing with the Constitution. I think the check and balance is there for a purpose, and I think it should stay in place. It always worries me when the legislature gets full control of things like their suitable education. We've defined it now at least twice with the Augenblick-Meyer and then the legislative post-audit, and they don't like the answer that keeps coming up because they keep telling them that they need to fund it higher. So if we gave them sole ownership over how that would be funded, that would be a very scary situation. And I agree with the local funding that is where we hope, that's our best hope to educate our kids in the way we think is suitable, which may not always be the same out further in the state.
Thank you, Ms. Kirsch.
Yes, I see both sides on this. Are we crushing our system of balances, or are we safeguarding something? Looking at recent American history and also the case that was stated earlier, a lot of times courts are not even supporting the votes, overwhelming votes of people in their areas. So it's kind of a risk anymore at this point to put a lot out there. So what I am saying is I would consider this constitutional amendment and also emphasize, as the others have, that it's very important that we get more local control of our funds and that we do work on this terrible formula, and that you guys are the best lobbyists. If you go to your legislators, you're the ones with the best voice.
Thank you, Mr. McCray.
Like everyone else, I feel that the checks and balances is there for a reason. With the way that the legislator is sitting right now, they're looking to make a lot more cuts across the board, especially to education. I feel that making a constitutional amendment that would pretty much take away that check on the legislator would be devastating. That being said, I feel that the power for that is more in the people than it is in the legislature, because if it weren't for the people that were voting, the legislator wouldn't be set up the way it is today. I feel that people need to take more of an ownership in their communities and not just vote for somebody and say, okay, that's all I have. So I think getting a better grasp on local ownership on the patrons level and taking a vested interest in financing the education is our best options.
Thank you. Mr. Dorr.
I would be against any sort of constitutional amendment that would, again, take away our checks and balances. It's there for a reason. If the legislature had a total control, Shawnee Mission would probably get about half the money it's getting now, and everybody else would probably get more if they had total control over everything. And again, there has to be somebody there to say, this is the way it's going to be, and to put a stop to things being unequal across the state. So that they gives them ultimate control or approval, leave it at that. There does need to be some sort of adjustment and some work with the formula. Exactly what that's going to be, that's really hard to say at this point, but obviously it's not working for the Shawnee Mission District. So we do have to make some sort of adjustment and work with our people at Topeka.
Thank you. Ms. Goodburn.
I agree with what you said. Definitely would not be in favor of this, and I think that we just need to really work with these legislators and try to get more money for our district, and to try to get local control. It's really, really, really important that we do that.
Thank you. Mr. John Matiste.
I agree with everything that everyone has said, but I want to add this part. This should be a three-pronged situation. It should be adjudicated, legislated, and with community service, community people. In other words, the people put the legislator where they are, then you need to move them. It is nice to fault others when we ourselves are the blamer. So we have to move to put people in position that will address the issue of the community. Now we have to be very careful. If we say Johnson County, for example, you do your own taxing, you create another problem. People from out of state will come in, and then what you have a changing landscape of population in the community. So we create one situation, and then we fault another one. So it's, excuse the expression, damage you do, damage you don't. So we at the local level have to deal with the real issue to revive that formula. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, question number 6 goes first to Ms. Mack. As we face the need to lay off teachers, what is your stance on negotiating to remove the last in, first out rule? In other words, as we have fewer teachers, are the kids best served by keeping the most effective teachers, regardless of their years of teaching?
As a standing board member, I have to be careful because we are in the middle of contract negotiations right now. The first 3 years that teachers are employed by the Shawnee Mission School District, they're considered to be on a probationary basis. What I would like to see happen is that it's not last in, first out. That those teachers that are looked at for those first 3 years of probation be looked at as a whole. That may not win me any personality contest, but I think that we're missing out on not being able to hire more teachers, these young teachers coming out of schools. But I think if we want to look at those first 3 years when the teachers are on probation and look at those teachers, that's what we need to do more as a district. And as I said, not last in, first out.
Thank you. Mr. Altenberg.
As a former teacher and NEA member many years ago, I understand the concept of why tenured teachers, particularly teachers with more experience, are given the first opportunity to keep a job. I support that. I do believe that there is an issue when you are declining in enrollment and you're cutting staff, that You have a problem losing sometimes some very highly qualified young teachers who can contribute a great deal to a school. I know as an administrator, my goal was always to have a good mix in my building. Older teachers that had a lot of experience and younger teachers that added that kind of that pizzazz maybe that they would bring that they might not have otherwise. But as far as the situation as it exists right now, that's the policy. It would be difficult to say what we would come up with as an alternative. So I really don't have a position other than to say that I still support the idea of the more experienced teacher keeping their position.
Thank you, Ms. Levin.
If that's a concern in the district among the teachers, and it's something that they would like to bring before the board or introduce into discussions, then I think that merits discussion and review. It'd be very complicated to try to institute it. How would you evaluate teachers? I don't think that's. I think that would be very difficult to try to introduce that. I was a teacher for 6 years in the classroom and was always that younger teacher. I learned a lot from the older teachers and the more experienced teachers that were there, and value the teachers that our kids have had that have lots of experience. I think it would be a very difficult situation, but if it's a concern of the teachers, then I would be willing to listen to that.
Mr. St. Clair.
It's a tough issue because I think when you try and figure out what would the alternative be, that becomes probably a very subjective type of evaluation. And it's hard to try and figure out how would that work, how cumbersome would it be, and some of those kinds of things. The one thing that maybe you could somehow provide a mix is maybe within a band of years of service, there could be a little more subjectivity, a little more play with which teachers can stay and which cannot. But I think it's going to be hard to implement some kind of system that's totally subjective, that is not based on some kind of year range, and it'd just be hard to implement, and I think hard to justify over time.
Thank you, Ms. Seela.
I agree with Mr. St. Clair, and Mrs. Levins here too. It was put in place for a reason, and everyone likes job security, I know, and how to change that would be a very, very difficult process, I think, to go through. Although it's very hard to see that fresh new blood that comes into the schools each year, that they are the first ones to get paired off if cuts need to be made, which is obviously the mode that we are in these days. But I would say I would not know how to actually go about that, to change that system as far as last in, first out.
Thank you, Ms. Hirsch.
This one is so difficult. Last in, first out seems so confining, and yet we don't have a system set up right now, as everyone said, to really evaluate teachers as we should. We know that sometimes teachers that get tenured tend to, yeah, okay, we won't go there. But that's not true, of course. A lot of dedicated, wonderful teachers who work years and who are tremendous value to our community. So I would just say this is something I would have to think about a great deal, and as I think Joan said, if this is something that the teachers are worried about, then yes, I'd like to hear from the teachers.
Mr. McCray.
In terms of the question as it's asked, first in or last in, first out it has the potential to be very unfair to a new teacher, especially if you have a very bright teacher, very up-and-coming teacher. I would feel better having a little bit more of a subjectivity to it, having a little bit more of a merit-based system to it. In terms of putting it in place, I think it would take a tremendous effort on part of the board, the administration, and the NEA to come up with a very fair system to do it. And it's not something that would happen, overnight. It would be something that would be a very prolonged process that would require very much input.
Thank you, Mr. Moore.
As being one of those teachers that was last in, first out, even at the college level previously, it's not necessarily always the best thing, because sometimes those younger teachers are the better ones. However, we all have to pay our dues. Tenure is a very, very important aspect of working in education. It's not something that I would ever want to see go away, because those students that are going into college right now wanting to become teachers, they want to look at that in the future and say, hey, you know, I'm going to be able to get tenure someday, and it keeps them coming in to the district and going into education. So as much as I don't like the last in, first out rule, I think it's just at this point a sign of the times.
Thank you.
I think this would be extremely difficult to change. I think that it would take a huge amount of collaboration on part of the teachers to be able to change something like this, and although it doesn't seem fair, it's probably the fairest way to do it right now, and I don't know how you come up with an alternative.
Mr. Jean-Baptiste?
This is a very sensitive subject and topic to me, because I'm going to deviate from the whole thing. You know, mostly when you come to minorities and female to some extent, they are the first hire and the first fire. I mean, the last hire and the first fire. But on the other hand, if a teacher or any staff is doing their work according to a proper evaluation system, I see no problem in terms of whether you have tenure or not. Do you have tenure with appropriate evaluation or qualification? Or do you have tenure just because you have tenure compared to a young teacher? Everyone should be equally when it comes to evaluation. But the problem is the evaluator, the person who's doing the evaluation. That's where these issues come in. We have to bite the bullet to be fair to all. Whether you're a young teacher with 3 years or another teacher with 40 years, if you meet the criteria established appropriately according to the evaluation, yes.
Ms. Jefferson?
Well, as a former teacher, I will say that, again, the system that we have in place is in place for a reason, and let me tell you why. I've heard the comment sometimes from the public, well, I don't work with tenure. Why should a teacher work with tenure? Well, let me tell you why, because it is a very unique situation in that when teachers walk into a classroom, they're being evaluated on that mix of kids that walks into that classroom, the dynamics of that classroom. Some teachers do better with boys in a classroom, and sometimes they end up getting more boys in a classroom. Learning disability children, some of them honestly do get more than that as well. So, and they're also being judged. What are you going to judge them on? Are you going to judge them on performance of the children? Well, how have those children been educated before coming into that classroom? There's so many aspects of that of evaluation. I do support the current system the way it is, because that's a protection of a very unique dynamic of educators.
Thank you. Now we go to question number 7. Mr. Altenberg, your question to you, and I think you've heard this one before. The current Shawnee Mission Board of Education has proposed that every teacher may be asked at any time to provide a letter from his or her physician stating that said teacher is physically and mentally fit for duty. Do you support this proposal? And if so, would you be willing to provide similar documentation for yourself prior to the election?
I would not support such a policy. I do think that if an administrator in a building, for example, thinks that there is an issue with someone because of a mental or physical disability, then they should start a process with human resources to try to get that teacher help if that's what they need. But certainly I wouldn't just blanket ask 2,000 teachers to provide that kind of information. And I wouldn't be opposed to doing that myself.
Thank you. Ms. Levens?
I would not be in favor of that policy. There are processes in place to address concerns if teachers, for some reason, do not seem to be fit for duty. Our kids were in Shawnee Mission schools from kindergarten through high school. All 3 graduated from Shawnee Mission schools. During that time, there was one instance in which was a teacher-headed health issue which impacted her performance in the classroom. And when we talked to administrators about that, they asked, had we talked with the teacher first, which I think is an excellent policy, go to the source. But when it became clear that the issue was impacting the performance in the classroom and classroom behavior, the administration acted in a process of asking for parents to provide documentation. There's a very formal process in place. It protects teachers. However, if an issue does arise with someone, there's a process in place that also protects the teachers, helps take care of the issue.
Mr. Sinclair.
Okay, just trying to wing it again, thanks for this
There's
microphone.
something about right here.
I wouldn't support a policy like that. I think really those kinds of issues are best dealt with on a one-on-one basis. So when those situations do arise, the teacher, the administrator, they can work through that and seek the help that they need and or want and work through it on that particular basis.
Thank you. Ms. Zila?
I don't know that I could support this as well either, unless it's, well, I guess this was just normal classroom, not coming back from a leave or anything like that. So I'd say if there's issues, they should be noted and a process put in place to deal with that teacher if there are problems with them. And like Joan said as well, document it and work through the process with that teacher.
Thank you. Ms. Kirsch?
Yes, I wouldn't put it in place either. I think there's plenty of checks and balances to watch out for how teachers are doing and plenty of witnesses to see if they need help or not. And as for myself, it's okay, but let's do it for every elected official. I wonder what would happen then.
Thank you, Mr. McRae.
I feel that if a teacher has to worry about a random check, that's just one more stress that they have to worry about on top of everything else that they're dealing with. I feel if there's a specific need, it should be brought to the administrator, whether it be within the building or to the district as a whole, depending on the severity of the concerns. But I do feel that it should be a very one-on-one situation with justifiable cause.
Thank you. Mr. Dorr?
I would not support a policy like that. There's already a policy in place if there was a workman's comp issue or somebody who's off on medical leave that they have to be able to provide documentation they're ready to return to work. So why do we need another policy in place like that? Just does not make sense to me.
Thank you. Ms. Goodburn?
I'm not exactly sure where this even came from. It must have had some kind of situation where they were having to deal with that situation where it would have been maybe helpful to have some kind of doctor's note or something like that. But I would not be in support of that. No, I don't plan on getting a doctor's note.
Thank you. Mr. John Baptiste?
I would not support such policy. And to your second part of the question, yes, I'll take a test at any time, anywhere,
Thank you. Ms. Texan?
I am very concerned about any policy that would demoralize our teachers. I think this is a trust issue, and there are obviously, clearly, HR programs in place, but I have not seen this, and I have worked with such excellent educators across the district, so no, I would not support this policy.
Ms. Mack?
Yeah, I can say what everybody else said, and I'm scratching my head trying to figure out, as Mrs. Goodburn, we have to read a lot of policy, and I'm really trying my best to remember where this would come from, but again, I agree, I don't know if I can support this as well.
Thank you. Okay, we go to question 8, and it's Ms. Levin's turn. Different mic works. How would you advocate for public education, especially in regards to, number 1, our new governor, who some say leans toward charter schools, and 2, our legislature, which even talks about revoking last year's 1% sales tax increase?
Exactly. I think that's why I am a former PTA officer and have spent a lot of years marching to Topeka, advocating before the state legislature, making friends with legislators, building relationships, thinking, working for that candidate, thinking, by gosh, now we've got it nailed, we've got our education candidate, only we'll have that candidate change after being in Topeka for a few years. So I think it's time for us to turn to ourselves. I think we have a strong community, a phenomenal community, and we have the resources in this community to impact and change it and to maintain this standard of excellence that we have in our community. Just in my career, I've advocated and worked for and written grants and built relationships and brought over $500,000 in programming, resources and equipment into our schools. I've been building relationships with corporations like Garmin, Cerner, Caremark, CVS Caremark, and others to build relationships and bring
Thank you
resources
very
to our
much.
schools.
Mr. St. Clair?
Thank you. Good question. From my perspective, I know Governor Brownback. I know many of the folks in the legislature through my years as a councilman and mayor in the city of Fairway. I believe I have some of those relationships to at least have a discussion with them about school finance and school funding formula. Getting back to something I mentioned a little bit earlier, I think it's also about changing the playing field, looking for other creative solutions in terms of how we can help locally fund our schools. And one example I'll give you is that when I was mayor of Fairway, when there was a county sales tax, if you might remember, I helped engineer our city's effort to give back our city portion of that tax to the school district. Now, other cities didn't follow suit, and that was their choice, but I thought it was vitally important to donate our money back to the school district because that's why the tax was passed. So I'll be looking for other ways to work with local communities. I'm not sure if that's the answer again, it may not work, but other ways to help raise funds locally to educate our kids like we want to educate them.
Thank you. Ms. Della?
Again, advocacy in the legislature I think is so vitally important, and I think that the folks outside of Johnson County get a little tired of hearing from Johnson County, thinking that we are all just big gold misers here and have no problems, and they don't realize that we're a third of free and reduced lunch in our district here, and the dynamics have changed incredibly. The demographics have changed in our district. To the governor, I remember him saying, let's get a new finance formula going, and I'm just really hoping that maybe still will come forward from him. It's disappointing to think that vouchers are coming forward again or might be proposed. I don't think anyone spoke to the 1-cent sales tax being revoked. Oh my gosh, if we had other sources of revenue, I would say, that's a possibility, but it looks very grim in the legislature, so I would say that's probably the last thing that they need to do.
Thank you. Ms. Kirsch?
As far as advocating public education, I think we have an excellent record to stand upon, and there's a passion for excellence in our community. I've seen it when I walked into some of the schools and seen the awards in the cases and along the walls, and it's just a blessing to have that kind of thing. And but our states are facing a terrible situation. I mean, we're running out of money. So again, I think it's going to have to come back. We're going to have to change our thinking and not look so much for state funding as to help ourselves as much as we can. So I don't know how we're going to do that. I think we can't do that.
Thank you. Mr. McCray?
I'm going to kind of answer that question backwards. With the repeal of the 1-cent sales tax, at first, you think less tax, that's great. The biggest problem with that, though, is when you lose state funding, you have to find some way to make it up. Many times it comes out at the local level. Because of the way that the education funding is set up, we can't provide that at the local level for our students. Advocacy, again, is huge. However, I feel that it needs to start before it gets to Topeka. Calling your legislators and everything and letting them know how you feel is awesome, but until you get a voting base that is worried about more than just a single issue, and get a voting base that is more worried about the future, worrying about education for their children, for their children's children, I don't feel that the current legislature has those ideas in mind.
Thank you. Mr. Dorr?
In initially the way to be able to address being an advocate, sorry, been a long day, for our district, for public education through the governor, through the legislators, is to not only be there ourselves as a board rep, but through the lobbyists of the NEA, through working with our city offices, with the mayors of Overland Park and Merriam. Everybody has to work together in an effort for it to be effective. The voters have to let their representatives know we can't have this. The 1 cent sales tax, it will be a pity if that actually gets pulled back. We're all going to be hurting a lot worse than what we already are. So, my answer is get out there and just talk to everybody and get everybody involved to stop those things from happening.
Thank you. Ms. Goodburn?
Yes, I agree. It is vitally important. Everyone needs to get involved. That's why we need to really engage our PTAs too. We've been doing it for years and years and years, trying to get people to go up to Topeka. It is really vital now that we do that. We need to get, and I can't believe they'd be even considering a 1 cent sales tax. We have $550 million that they're, or $1 billion are in the hole. I can't believe that they'd actually be thinking about that. So it's really vitally important everyone get involved. We really have to find new creative ways to fund. I think we are, like I think John said, we're going to have to really find ways to do it ourselves, because I'm just not sure there's any answers up in Topeka.
Thank you. Mr. John Baptiste?
I agree with everything everyone is saying. However, we have to stop reacting and start being more preventative and not wait till something happens. Where are our plans? Short range plan and long range plan. Now, you mentioned something about vouchers. I have no issue with vouchers. Vouchers, in most cases, according to study, is positive when it comes to the public school. In competition, and competition is good, and that's what we need for our students.
Thank you. Ms. Jefferson?
Well, first to the issue of vouchers, working in the private school, quite frankly, especially when it comes to religious private schools, they don't want the vouchers. They don't want the federal money. They don't want the federal government dabbling and telling them what to do and how to teach and what they can and cannot teach. First of all, I've seen voucher systems in other states. I've not seen anything that would work well here. What we want to do is promote strong public schools, because when you promote strong public schools, what you do is that equals strong business, people coming to the community, and strong communities to raise our children. One of the things that we need to do is, again, we talked about looking at raising taxes locally. We have to be proactive. We have to initiate best practices within our system here in order to find efficiencies in our heating and cooling and our maintenance and all of these different things. It's being used all over the United States. It's being used in some of our surrounding districts. It works. There are efficiencies to be found before we start talking about it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Mack?
Just to follow up on what Ms. Jefferson just said, we've already started those efficiencies. We've saved over $1 million in the last 2 years in our energy costs. But the question was advocacy for public education, and I think Board of Education members have to be informed on what's going on in front of the legislature. It used to be pretty easy for me. I could just look over and ask Cindy Neighbor what was going on. Can't do that now, but I have a standing invitation with my current representative. He has not gotten back to me on when we can meet. I've hand-delivered invitations to Mary Pilcher Cook's home to come up to Shawnee Mission Northwest to see the new buildings that we have, the new auxiliary gym. Saw the governor on Friday at a luncheon that we had, and I got to lobby him personally. And he said, I'm putting more money in than we did last year. And I said, well, then how come we're falling millions of dollars short in Shawnee Mission? I got to lobby him, and he said he is in favor of Senate Bill 19, which has the money go through the CAPER system. So I think that's a positive. That's something we need to take off and tell our lobby.
Thank you. Mr. Alton Vern?
There have been a lot of things that I agree with, most everything. I think that it's really important that we get involved more electorally. In a lot of situations, we elect people who really win in the primary with 15 or 20% of the vote because of the low turnout not there, and then we're stuck maybe with a candidate who, if we'd have looked at more closely, we might not have voted for. Sometimes they're always not quite upfront about what they're going to do when they get there. But I think we need to look outside the box a little bit. It's been suggested to me that we maybe look at some kind of an endowment program for this district, where we get people who have money, and maybe they will donate some, that we can have an endowment that we can go off of. I know we have the Education Foundation, but we'd be talking about a lot larger sums of money. But that is something that we should at least approach, because I think this funding problem is not going to go away. Not going to go away for quite a while. And so it's just something that we might look at, setting up some sort of an endowment.
Thank you. Now will be, I think, the last question, and it will be directed to Mr. St. Clair. And after they've completed this, we will have a 1-minute closing for each. Mr. St. Clair, please state your attitude toward the way in which the school closing plan was handled by the SMSD administrators.
Well, I think, as we've seen, there are always improvements that can be made, and certainly with that process, I think, to involve folks earlier on, more completely, I think would have taken some of the sting and pain away. There are a lot of folks that are still hurt by that process, and we certainly needed time to heal in this district. One example I would point to is that when I was on the Boundaries and Facilities Committee about 8 to 10 years ago, we were a group of administrators, politicians, parents, patrons, teachers, and we came up with a lot of ideas about boundary changes and the bond program and school closings. Had a chance to really sort all those out, talk through them in a lot of different discussions, like 10 or 15 different meetings, and I think it really helped develop solid recommendations that the community ended up supporting. And there was some pain with some of the school closings, but with the new buildings, I think we overcame that. And I think some kind of ongoing advocacy group like that could wrestle with major issues faced by the district would be a good thing in terms of addressing issues as they come up.
Thank you. Ms. Sela?
Well, I think one of the big stumbling blocks of the whole thing that happened last semester with the school closures and boundary changes was the numbers. And the numbers, people said, kept changing. That proposal, all the recommendations were presented on September 13th, and the actual enrollment count date is September 20th. So we went from our projected numbers to the actual numbers, and something was lost in the translation there, and it did not look good. But we hopefully got the numbers all straight, and my attitude was, you know, I felt that we tried very hard to involve the community. We had 17 meetings, I think it was, with different community venues around there to address the recommendations that were made by the administrator. And, you know, it was the board that said, you know what, you have to show us efficiencies. These are hard times here. So that was his task, and he came back with those recommendations.
Thank you. Ms. Kirsch?
Well, it's easy to have hindsight, but I think a parent expressed it best that at a PTA meeting last night. She just felt like all of a sudden there was a barrage of information, and she just couldn't get a handle on it, and there seemed to be such a rush to make a decision. So I am a huge advocate of opening as much communication as we can. I'm looking at some other districts in the area and across the country that are doing more open forums and have a bunch of other ideas about keeping people involved. But parents, teachers, everybody has to have feel like they've been listened to, and that they have that they are really important to the decision-making process.
Mr. McCray?
As far as my attitude towards the closings, I feel it was a necessary evil, if you will. The biggest problem I saw with it was that a lot of people, looking back on it now, feel like that it was more or less just handed out and asked for what they thought of it, and then that their opinion didn't matter a whole lot. I think if we got more involved with people at the planning phases, you know, if we found a way to connect better with the people at the start of this process of deciding what schools needed to close or what boundaries needed to change, I feel that a lot of people wouldn't have been so overwhelmed right at the last minute once all the the decisions and everything hit the local news, I feel a lot of people just turn to the news and that's all that they get their information from. I'd like to see us make a better effort at utilizing social media and better connecting with the patrons, making them feel more of a sense of ownership.
Thank you. Mr. Dorr?
The school closing plan was definitely a difficult decision for everybody that was on the board. Personally, I feel that it was the necessary plan that had to be made. There had to be closings. I do feel, however, there could have been some better communication. The most important thing when we look at this type of situation is the communication from the entire community, and so that they feel involved and they have buy-in. And without that buy-in, everybody's going to feel a little bit hurt or a little bit disgruntled. So my number one thing would be making sure that if something like that came up again, that there was plenty of community buy-in, that the community was very involved in those decisions.
Thank you. Ms. McBurn?
I'm just not sure. These are really tough decisions. They're hard decisions, and nobody wants their school closed, and really nobody wants the boundary change. I just don't know how on earth you would have had a committee formed before these recommendations came out, and anyone would have liked any of them. I mean, nobody wants their school closed. I mean, period. In their local neighborhood. So I don't know how they could have done that differently than the way they did it. They came out with the recommendations. They had all those community meetings. I actually spoke at one. I was really, really pleased with the aligning of the middle schools. I think that was a really good move, especially personally for the Roseland kids to go on to Hawker Grove. Not really pleased with the fact that the North area attendance, the difference in the numbers between the actual attendance of the high schools didn't change. We didn't get any more students into the North area, which was really discerning to me. It's because of the problems with Hawker. We need to increase the size of Hawker before we can get more students in North. But I was not pleased with that. But as a whole,
Thank you.
yes.
Mr. John Baptiste?
I agree with what being told, what I've heard. One thing we have to keep in mind, in 2003, I believe the school district made some proposal or discussed the possibility of school closure, but there was no real action. So again, we have to get involved before an issue occurs. We have to stop reacting rather than being preventative. My attitude about school closing should be neighborhood school, but based on the time and the cost, time will change. We can no longer have a neighborhood school. So we have to go with what the administrator and what the school board have handed us down. So we have to make the best with what we have and not sacrifice the development and the education of our young people.
Thank you. Ms. Jepson?
With my master's in public administration, I have a specialty in conflict management and organizational change with that. And good managers, when good managers make decisions, what you do is that you involve collaboratively all stakeholders at the very beginning of that, before formulating the plan, then taking it back with the group and the community to make the comments in the public hearing forum. That didn't happen. Okay, that did not happen. That process of starting collaboratively first, and it involves transparency. Transparency is defined as access and standing. You have to have the access to your board and standing, meaning the teeth, to help influence those decisions. I was also very disappointed that we didn't have, the teachers did not have access and standing in these decisions as much as they should have been. That is why I'm supporting a community advisory council in order that we bring those back. We want to bring that back, have community collaboration for future processes.
Ms. Mack?
During that process, one thing that I think that got lost was that the superintendent rolled out proposals and recommendations. And as Mrs. Zila said, we had numerous meetings where we as board members listened. We listened, and so did the superintendent and the administration, and some of those recommendations were changed. Specifically in the northwest area, Shawnee was recommended to not close, and the Ray Marsh attendance boundary stayed, although 2 pockets of Blue Jacket Flint did go to Shawnee Mission North. Those things changed. What I learned in the process, and that was my first time going through it as a board member, was that we do need to look at how to engineer consent. And a good friend of mine told me that term. I had not heard it before. Second thing I learned is that people do watch a live stream of board meetings and listening meetings, and now we do have that in place at the Board of Education. I'm glad you all are interested in what the Board of Education does, and as the turnout tonight shows, you are interested in public schools, and I think that's tremendous.
Thank you. Mr. Altenburg?
I was not satisfied with the way the boundary changes and school closings were handled. I didn't feel that there was enough inclusion. I thought it demonstrated we have a problem with long-term planning. I felt like a lot of patrons did, that we were shut out early and then to a great extent ignored. For example, had we planned long-term, perhaps we would have added on to the 2 middle schools before we moved the kids. That having been said, a lot of money was saved. And trying to figure out how much more teachers or how many more teachers we might have to lay off if we had not saved that money is certainly something to consider seriously. I didn't get to say this at the beginning, but I definitely want to applaud the district's recent effort to survey patrons about where they think cuts should come from. That is a big step in the right direction.
Thank you. Ms. Clemens?
Our family has been in the Shawnee Mission School District for 20 years, and this is the 3rd cycling through of school closings and boundary changes that we've experienced. About 10 years ago, it was our school. It was on the table and under discussion for being closed. The proposals that we heard, some of the proposals that were enacted were first brought to the table in 2003, the recent changes. And that was a result of a task force and recommendations from community members and stakeholders. Some of those proposals were held off for 7 years, as long as possible, and avoided making boundary changes and school closings. But the demographics in our district have continued to change. We continue to lose population. I'm hopeful that we've plateaued now and that we can begin to establish ourselves. But it was no longer possible to forestall some of those changes. A patron from the North Attendance area said to me, what do we do? Do we run buildings that are not full and cut programs, or do we try to work to save programs that benefit all of our kids? And I think that's part of what we need to consider as we go forward.
Thank you very much. Now they have their 1-minute closing. Let's start at the other end and give Mr. McCray first shot. How's that?
In closing, I just feel that the school board has kind of a unique position in terms of providing a system of checks and balances over the administration. The school board is responsible for putting the administration in place. However, they do have a tremendous responsibility to the people who put the school board in place because they are an elected position. I encourage everyone to get to know everything you can about each and every one of us up here. Feel free, me personally, feel free to call me, to email me. You can find my information on the Kansas City Star's Midwest Democracy Project. The Johnson County Election Office homepage has a great wealth of information. And just encourage all your friends and family and your neighbors to get involved. Democracy works best when it's treated as an action word. If we have just 10% of the people making our decisions, then that leaves 90% of the people feeling left out. So I just encourage everyone to get out and vote.
Thank you. Kirsch?
I want to second the recommendation to go and do the survey on the site, and also to make additional comments because there were a couple of things I felt that should have been included. So be sure to make those inclusions if you see some. Second is the only reason I started this process, and now I realize even more how much school board candidates or school board members work, and of course they don't get paid, which is fine. But I think that's a testimony to the devotion of school board members and how awesome it's been for what they do. But my heart is to serve and to be open and to help our kids, our teachers, our parents as much as I possibly can, and I will work as hard as I can.
Thank you, Ms. Zila.
I would just like to tell you that I care very deeply about Shawnee Mission Schools. I am all for seeing the future to be as bright as the past has been for it. And it's all gloom and doom with the budget, and it's kind of a shame because great things are going on in the classrooms all over the district. I'm in the schools a lot, and it's wonderful to see. Class sizes are a bite, I have to say, but very good things are happening in Shawnee Mission. It's very difficult to make long-term plans also when the legislature kind of pulls out the rug from underneath you mid-year, when you've got your budgets all set and stuff. We've got some definite challenges facing us here. And I really look forward to facing those challenges and finding some creative ways with all of your help, trying to figure out how is best to keep this district as an outstanding district.
Thank you, Mr. St. Clair.
I just want to take a quick moment and thank everyone for being here tonight. I think it's great that you took time out of your evenings to come listen and find out as much about the candidates that you can. I think that's great, and I hope you continue to do so throughout the rest of this process. I've always felt we have the best school district in the state, and I would argue one of the best, very best in the country. And we are facing a tough time right now, and our district is under attack financially, but we need to do everything we can do to keep moving forward, keep finding other creative ways to help our district and to help our kids. I want to serve for three reasons. One, as I said earlier, I think I have the business experience and background to serve. I look and evaluate a lot of companies all over the country and help them find better ways to do things. Two, I've got the political experience serving as mayor, as council member. I know the legislature, I know the governor. I believe I have some ideas on how to work with our political system to make things better. And three, I have the passion to serve Shawnee Mission. I believe it's the very best district, as I said. My kids are going to the district. There are better, I think, creative ways we can look to fund our kids locally, increase our local options so we can better educate our kids in the future.
Thank you. Ms. Levens?
Wasn't intentional.
Shawnee Mission has a long tradition of academic excellence and strong community support, and it's very important that we continue that. But it's time to take charge of our own destiny and to turn to the community to find the resources and the innovative ways of going forward. We've got internationally recognized corporations, engineers, entrepreneurs, and it's time to bring those people to the table. We have leading energy consulting firms in our midst, and there are other districts around us who are taking advantage of some of this knowledge and expertise. Blue Valley has a Wilderness Science Center on classroom buildings that are using geothermal energy, and that's been in place for at least 10 years. The Olathe School District has had an operations and maintenance manager who has gone through that entire district, building by building, and realized real efficiencies. In our own district, Tomahawk Elementary, just on its own through a club, has reduced energy consumption by 28% in their building. Those are real dollars.
Thank you very much, Mr. Altenburn.
Before I start, I'd like to thank the National Education Association of Shawnee Mission for endorsing me today. That's something that's really an important endorsement for me, particularly with my background as a teacher. I'd like to tell you that I think I'm uniquely qualified to serve on the board. No one in this race can match my 35 years of experience, 15 years as a teacher, and 20 years as a building administrator. I truly have seen and experienced this district, its schools, teachers, and patrons throughout the area. I believe I can aid the board and the administration to be more transparent and collaborative. I am totally committed to be prepared to explain why. To accomplish this, we must ask, listen, and plan for the long term. Above all else, I want a fair process. In the end, what we all want is to provide the best education for all the children in our district, and we can do this if we work together, and together we will.
Thank you. Ms. Mack?
I just want to say I'm really tired of cutting budgets. It's really difficult sitting on the board these last couple of years and keep cutting budget. I want to tell you about the celebrations of Shawnee Mission. It's not all gloom and doom. And when you walk into the buildings, which I try and do on a regular basis, in fact, I gave blood at Shawnee Mission Northwest yesterday. If you went to the Board of Education meeting on February 14th, this information is online. Do you realize, even though our demographics and our diversity is changing, that 90% of our students are at 90% of them are at proficiency or above in reading and math. 90%. And we're looking at a changing demographic. Our teachers know this better than anybody. They're working harder than ever before. Mrs. Levins talked about our National Merit finalists. We have 6 presidential scholars. A Shawnee Mission student won the Kansas City Biz Fest. Laura Robeson was the Horizons Teacher of the Year.
Thank you very much.
I'm Shawnee Mission proud.
Good things are happening.
I truly believe that together we can do better for our schools. I believe that I have a unique experience in that I've worked with nonprofits and also as a public administrator, that I have a professional and public nonprofit administrator with extensive multicultural background. I believe that I possess the skills to make educated and thoughtful decisions for our district, and I'm passionate about education and relentless in researching and discovering proactive, pragmatic, and progressive methods to move our district forward. I believe we have to be proactive, not reactive. We have to increase transparency. We have to have access and standing for our groups, coordinating a community council advisory board, bringing that back. Supporting local controls to fund our schools, initiating best practices. Folks, they're out there. We need to initiate them here and make a difference here, and be more proactive rather than reactive. Thank you so much for being here this evening.
Thank you, Mr. John Baptiste.
First of all, I want to thank each and every one of you for listening to me tonight, but I'm going to talk to you about my community activity. I'm a member of the Shawnee Lions, which I was awarded a Malcolm John Award. I'm a member of the Knight of Columbus in 204, Citizen of the Year Award, and in 204, recognized by the Kansas City Star as one of the 10 emerging boys in Johnson County. Member of the American Red Cross, a shelter member, National Association, both states and branch president. A member of the FBI Kansas City Academy Alumni Award Association. In 205, award the Martin Luther King Award by the Governor Seville, and just last year in 2010 was able to have a bill passed to have a mural on the wall of the state capitol in Topeka. So I'm giving you all of these to let you know that I am involved in the community and I have the ability.
Thank you very much. Ms. Goodburn.
I'm going to continue Ms. Mack's comments because I am really Shawnee Mission proud as well. I'm a product of this district. I graduated from Shawnee Mission South. I absolutely adore the school district. I think it's just it's a great place to be. I know that it's depressing. There's a lot of gloom and doom out there, and that the budgets, they are not fun to deal with, and the boundary changes and the school closings, they are not fun to deal with. But I don't know if you all get, our principal, Dick Kramer, sends out an inspirational email every Sunday night, and I'm on that email. It's called 212. It's one of his tenets, and it's always, I look forward to getting that email because it is all the great news coming out of Shawnee Mission North, and believe me, there is a lot of great news coming out of that school. 17 more kids than last year are earning the Kansas Honor Scholars. The NJROTC continues to dominate, and it's going back to Pensacola this year to defend their national championship. I'm so proud.
Thank you. Your door.
Yeah.
I finally get the last word. Shawnee Mission has been through some major changes over the last few years. As the funding issues continue, so are those changes, and there's going to be more reductions. We know that it's going to happen. The key to success is communication. It's transparency. The board, the administration, everybody has to work with the community. We have to provide the community with some very concise and very accurate information about what's going to happen with the district and about where we're going, and then take that community input and make our decisions based on that. The district needs to look at a long-term plan. Okay, that plan must be viable, it must be accurate, and it has to be embraced by the community. I will take my experience as an educator, as a manager, and help develop that plan and help provide some of those solutions. I would like to thank Kathy and Harriet and everybody for putting this on tonight, and I would also like to thank the NEA for their endorsement of my
And we thank you. It says stop. I think we ought to give a round of applause. And I would like to thank the candidates for allowing me to murder some of their makings. And the Kathy Cook who organized this, she's been super. She keeps asking all back. And I also wish to thank all the sponsors who are here and inviting us to moderate these forums. And as a grassroots, nonpartisan organization, we're pleased to assist with educating the public on any community issues. And be sure to vote for the candidate of your choice on April the 5th, because your vote does count.
I want you guys to give the league a round of applause.